Welcome to the Tarvin Family Association YouTube channel. I'm Roger Hoffman, the current president of the association. Today I'd like to review the early history of the Tarvin Family Association and tell you about our founder, Sarah Thompson Tarvin. I draw from an article written by Sarah's son, Jim, photos provided by Sarah's son, Roy Tarvin, as well as a short history of the association written by Dorothy Tarvin Gibson. When Sarah Elizabeth Thompson married Everett Roy Tarvin in 1931, she had no idea that 40 years later she would be the force behind a movement to create the Tarvin Family Association. Sarah's mother-in-law had told her, "There aren't very many Tarvins in this world. You will only find one here or there." Stirred by that remark, Sarah Thompson Tarvin began a more or less casual search for her Tarvin cousins over the years. By 1970, her project turned into a very serious undertaking with the following aims. First, to trace Tarvin ancestry as far back as possible. Second, find all living Tarvin descendants. And third, record Tarvin history in print that would be available to all. She put a tremendous sense of purpose and intellect towards Tarvin genealogy as well as all other areas of her life. Sarah was born in 1905 and grew up in rural Casanova, Virginia, in a house that did not have electricity or indoor plumbing when she was very young. She later recalled that before her house had electricity, she and her sister were responsible for cleaning the chimneys of the oil lamps every morning, removing the soot that had accumulated from their use. She attended a one-room school at first, but later went to high school in Warrenton, Virginia. At that time, graduating from high school was not something that many children accomplished. Because her mother insisted that she needed to prepare for some kind of career, she commuted about 50 miles each day to Washington, D.C. by train for 6 months and got a secretarial certificate. This was the 1920s, and in rural America, the Great Depression had already begun. Job openings were non-existent, almost, but she happened to find one, filling in as a teacher in a one-room school in a village about 30 miles from her home. In those days, teachers were so poorly paid that she lived each week in the homes of the children that she was teaching. She was surprised to discover that she loved teaching children. And so at the end of the year, she applied to Madison College to get a degree in teaching, and soon was working in the president's office as the secretary to pay for her tuition and housing. When she graduated, she was asked to join the faculty of Madison College. Madison College is now James Madison University. She taught there for a few years until she was one of 10 women from across the country to be selected by Columbia University in New York to enroll in a fully funded doctoral program. She moved from tiny Casanova, Virginia, with its one general store, to the Big Apple, New York City. She recalled traveling by train with one suitcase and one typewriter. While attending graduate school at Columbia, she met Everett Roy Tarvin, who had grown up in Montezuma, Iowa on a farm. He excelled in school, attended Grinnell College in Iowa, and was in graduate school at Columbia in an electrical engineering program. Before completing her degree, Sarah was invited to join the faculty at the State University of New York at New Paltz in upstate New York. Not too long after that, Sarah and Everett married. Over the years, 4 children were to follow. Being a mother and teaching in the public schools in Ridgewood, New Jersey, kept her quite busy. So it was only after she retired in the 1960s that her active mind began looking for a new challenge. Always having been interested in family stories and family history, she took up the task of tracing Tarvin genealogy and eventually established the Tarvin Family Association. She never considered tracing her surname Thompson, because, she said, there are too many Thompsons. Also, the Tarvin surname was traceable back to the arrival of the first Tarvin in America in the 1700s. That appealed to her. This was a time when home computers and the internet did not exist. She visited dozens of libraries for death records and dozens of graveyards around the country to trace family lines. She drove a car into her late 80s. She wrote hundreds of letters and made even more phone calls at a time when long-distance calls were expensive. She kept meticulous notes and had over 1,000 3x5 cards with names and dates of descendants along with other information. She had boxes full of lists and histories of Tarvin descendants. She spoke with hundreds of Tarvins and in dozens of states and met and became friends with many of them. In one of her letters, Sarah wrote, "Why am I doing this? There are several reasons, none of which have been anything to do with my making money. Now to the one thought that comes to all of us when we receive a letter asking us or offering us something. What will this cost me? The answer is none, as far as money is concerned. As to time, it will take some of that, which I hope you will find worthwhile in the long run. I've written hundreds of letters to different cousins over the past years, and I'm still enjoying the many answers and information that has come to me through these letters." Most definitely for Sarah, this was a labor of love. This labor of love did take a lot of time. Without Sarah's efforts, no Tarvin Family Association would have been formed, let alone endure to this day. Through her tireless efforts, much good has been done. Many cousins have met and become acquainted with each other, and many records have been researched and preserved. Sarah was not alone. The work that began as an individual project became a community one. She was the one, however, who called for and helped establish the annual Tarvin Family Reunion. She also felt that the site of the reunion should be moved each year to a different location to encourage others to attend. The reunions began in 1983 after Sarah asked her sisters-in-law, Margaret Bates Tarvin and Marjorie Tarvin Little, to arrange a Tarvin reunion in Montezuma, Iowa, where many of the descendants of her in-laws, DeRoy and Una Turney Tarvin, lived. This was a Tarvin clan of what we would call nowadays Tarvin Line 10. In all, 62 Tarvin descendants from several lines attended. In 1984, Sarah sent letters to all the Tarvins who were known at that time, inviting them to Newport, Kentucky, to a 3-day Tarvin reunion, and the tradition has continued in various locations every year since. Sarah's many letters found their way to many Tarvin cousins around the country, some of whom had information to share, and revealed earlier efforts to trace Tarvin roots. At that same 1984 reunion, Sarah was presented with an original drawing that is the first known attempt to document the spreading descendants of Reverend George Tarvin. The drawing was made in 1897 when Richard J. Tarvin, a great-grandson of Reverend George, created a depiction of the Tarvin family. George Tarvin, along with his wife, quote, Miss Craycraft, was represented as the main trunk of the tree, with roots in England. George's 13 children are represented as main branches off the trunk. The grandchildren are shown as twigs, and the great-grandchildren are depicted as leaves, some of them named and some not. In February 1985, Sarah wrote a letter to her sounding board members, 40 to 50 Tarvin cousins who had shown the most interest. She solicited their opinions for furthering the progress of Tarvin genealogy. At this point, 2 reunions had already been held. Later in the year, at the 1985 reunion, officers were elected to work toward a more formal organization. At the 1986 reunion, a constitution and bylaws were adopted. In the fall of 1986, Sarah wrote another letter. She said, quote, I've been designated executive director. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm using it as a vehicle for saying now and then what I think we ought to be doing. The first newsletter was published by Shirley Ferguson Brown in November 1986. It reported that the Tarvin Family Association had been officially inaugurated at the 4th annual reunion held in Newport, Kentucky in August 1986. Over the years, the Tarvin Lifeline has had 1 to 4 editions published each year. All of these issues, as well as the 2 letters that Sarah wrote to the membership, are accessible on the association website, tarvinfamily.org. Sarah, who was a longtime quilter, suggested that a family heirloom quilt be made, with members across the country contributing individual squares. She established the tradition of a raffle of the Tarvin family quilt as a fundraiser at each reunion. The first quilt was done for the 1987 reunion at Louisville, Kentucky. O.C. Tarvin Gibson was the quilt chairman and did the beautiful ornate quilting for a number of years. There has been a Tarvin family quilt every year since, except for the pandemic year of 2020. The first auction was held after the banquet of the first Denver reunion in 1988. It was a huge success, and in many years that followed, each reunion has an auction of Tarvin memorabilia. In recognition of her efforts and inspiration, the association named Sarah T. Tarvin, founder of the Tarvin Family Association. Sarah was proud of the work that she did and of the many friends she'd made. She loved attending reunions, and did so until her advanced age prevented her from making the trip. Sarah died in 1997 at the age of 92 in upstate New York, and is buried in the Grace Episcopal Church Cemetery, adjacent to the church she attended as a child, Grace Church in Casanova, Virginia. This is a screenshot of her memorial found on findagrave.com. Because of Sarah's determined effort and the help of those many that she recruited, the Tarvin Family Association was established and continues to this day. Many of the traditions begun in the 1980s by Sarah and her Tarvin cousins continue each year as we gather at our annual Tarvin reunion. We invite all of our Tarvin cousins to join us at our upcoming reunions, which you can learn more about on our website, tarvinfamily.org. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you have other ideas or requests for videos, please tell us in the comments. Join me for my next video, which will focus on the association happenings in the 1990s. Thank you.